Welcome to part 2 of my deep dive on American Horror Story Murder House. If you missed part 1, definitely check that out first, because in this one we are breaking down the final 6 episodes of the season, alongside some of the season's unique promotional gimmicks, behind the scenes trivia, and more. But if you're all caught up on part 1, welcome back, and let's jump right into the meat of it all and unpack the next chapter of the Murder House saga. Episode 7, Open House, begins by establishing a previous romantic relationship between Constance Langdon and Larry Harvey in a flashback set in 1994, which also reveals the identity of another one of Constance's children, Beauregard. Constance tells Larry that she is being charged with child neglect and Beauregard is to be locked in an institution. Using Larry's strong feelings for her, Constance instructs him to do some of the dirtiest of all dirty work by murdering her son so he will not face a life without his mother, as Constance puts it. Before Larry does the unthinkable, we bear witness to the horrendous living conditions Constance is subjecting Beau to. Beauregard's room is the attic of the murder house, where he remains chained to the floor seemingly at all times, with only a bed and a red ball to call his own. Some online sources have diagnosed Beauregard, but the show itself doesn't, aside from saying he has separation anxiety when away from Constance. This is yet another horrific scene revealing new layers of Constance's torment against her disabled children, while claiming such torment is for their own protection. In the present day, Dr. Hall gives Ben and Vivian some big news.
You're having twins. What?
Then Marcy the realtor is back and better than ever.
Everything was meticulously restored by a couple of the previous homeowners.
This is the episode's titular open house, and Marcy is currently showing the house to a property developer named Joe, who wishes to bulldoze the entire property to build an apartment building. In the kitchen, Marcy and Vivian meet Larry for the first time, and Marcy gives him a pretty cold welcome.
Put down the stemware.
What are you doing?
There are a lot of minority men in this city who would like nothing more than to ravage me on this countertop.
What the hell, Marcy?
What you're doing is in direct violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
That night, Vivian masturbates while picturing Luke, the security guard she's been flirting with. Her fantasy then switches to Ben before ultimately becoming a much more violent memory of her rape at the hands of the rubber man. Disturbed, Vivian snaps out of her head shortly thereafter. Subsequently, Violet self-harms once again, and of course the camera does not hesitate to go for a close-up for about the 4th time this season, but unlike how they'd previously bonded over hurting themselves, Tate has now had a change of heart.
Promise me you'll never cut yourself again.
During a traditional family dinner, Ben proposes that Violet may be depressed, you think. Violet says she is upset that they moved states only for them to still break up, and she's also upset that they're selling her big spooky house. But
I'm not gonna off myself, so you can go back to your policy of benign neglect.
the next day, after finding out Larry has talked to Vivian, Ben takes things to the next level, becoming Sherlock Holmes entirely off-screen, and discovering Larry was never in prison, but he was rather institutionalized, and Ben thinks Larry's been lying about everything, from murdering his family to also murdering Hayden. But Larry ensures that not everything he said is a lie, although his true motives for wanting to drive the Harmons out of the house is so that he can buy it and win back none other than Constance Langdon. We then flash back to the actual incident that resulted in the death of Larry's family. It begins with Larry telling his wife Lorraine that he's having an affair with Constance. He also tells her to leave the house with the girls so he and Constance can live together. The flashback then cuts to smoke billowing out of a bedroom in the murder house where Lorraine has locked herself and her daughters inside and set it ablaze. Then Vivian returns to the Eternal Darkness tour with Marcy this time to hear the rest of the house's history that she missed last time. Showing another famous Los Angeles murder site, we first see the gate of Nicole Brown Simpson's house where she and Ron Goldman were murdered in 1994. Ryan Murphy Productions, of course, would again fixate on this location in the first spin-off to American American Horror Story, American Crime Story, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, which also features the likes of Murder House alums Connie Britton and Sarah Paulson. Then, stopping at the murder house, we of course get some more backstory to Charles, Nora, and Thaddeus Montgomery. In this flashback, Charles tells Nora he's brought their baby back to life. But when she sees what Thaddeus has become, Nora discovers his thirst for blood, and she attempts killing him.
No, I tried. I stabbed it with a letter opener, but it clung to life, Charles. No.
Nora gives Charles the validation he craves before shooting him in the head, then giving herself that same fate as well. In the basement, Larry meets with Constance, where his feelings for her are not reciprocated.
I love you.
Ugh. You're disgusting. You're weak.
He then admits,
The house didn't do this to me. You did this to me.
and eventually Larry informs her of Joe's plans to destroy this haunted mansion, and later in the attic, Beauregard shows his physical form to Violet, which scares her, but Tate calms her down.
They're appearing to you now because you're evolved.
Tate shows Violet a secret hole in the attic with some souvenirs of residents past, including a jar of God knows what from the Montgomerys, gay porn, presumably from those previous homos.
I think gay porn is hot.
Totally.
Also in the hole is Nora's silverware and photographs of all three Montgomerys. Constance visits Joe, the property developer, to try and convince him not to destroy the murder house. Constance takes a moral stance against destroying the homes of others for the sake of, in this case, apartment buildings. But obviously Constance truly just wants the souls trapped within the murder house's halls to remain there, both her loved ones and her enemies. She truly does not give a fuck about urbanization, and neither does Joe, because he literally then tells Constance to shut up and make him a sandwich. I am not joking. And elsewhere, Ben asks Tate to let him know if Violet is ever in serious trouble.
I wish you were my father. My life would have been a lot different.
Constance tries to talk to Tate after his session, but let's just say Tate's giving her the cold shoulder.
Turns out I hate my mother.
She then visits her other son for the first time all season, Beauregard.
Mama's got to say goodbye. They're gonna take you away from me. They're gonna take everything away. Forever.
In the kitchen, Moira says Constance will go to prison once Joe discovers the bones in the yard during the construction of a swimming pool Joe promised her.
There's not going to be a swimming pool, you stupid slut.
Another line from this season that will live for eternity. Master manipulator Constance then proposes she and Moira team up to get revenge on Joe, who Constance has framed as a liar with no intention of a swimming pool. To level out Joe's misogyny with her own misandry, Moira bites his before Larry suffocates him with the old plastic bag. The episode ends with Violet showing Vivian the photo of Nora that Tate found earlier, and Vivian recognized her from their encounter in episode 3. Despite giving us some great one-liners, this episode feels like a collection of side quests that, in the grand scheme of things, don't progress the story as much as desired. We return to the Eternal Darkness tour for the third time in this episode. Surely we could learn about the Montgomerys through a different framing device at this point, but alas. We also meet Joe, the property developer, who at first seems pretty important in this episode, but as he's killed at the very end of the episode, it's clear he was just a one-episode conflict to stretch out the actual conflicts with the Harmons and Constance and Moira, which I personally would much rather we get into now, but here we are. Filler episodes are not always bad. Take episode 2, Home Invasion, for instance, which managed to be interesting while still not being all that integral to the story. This episode and its Joe conflict is just dull, and Constance is just really racist the entire time. All in all, I just wish this episode pulled at one of its earlier loose threads to explore more in this episode rather than introducing this boring property guy. For instance, the detectives alluded to the robbers from episode 2 being a part of a cult recreating famous LA murders. Why not explore that a little more? But Joe is not the only thing in this episode, and story-wise, the episode has its moments, but it truly shines by amplifying side characters like Marcy and Larry, despite starting to push Vivian out of the main conflicts, which is an issue that plagues the rest of the season. Now, before we move on to episode 8, which makes up for this episode with some intense revelations, let's first take a peek at this season's unique marketing campaign. FX only released a handful of posters and teasers for the first season of AHS, but they clearly set the tone for the creepy and striking teasers of seasons to come. Some memorable teasers include several different visualizations of the season's key poster, as well as a visualization of the cast poster. There are a couple other tiny teasers, but there's not too much to get into there, and same goes with the very limited amount of different posters that were released. That said, the key art itself is one of the series' best, so the marketing team definitely made their limited designs count. One of the more unique ways FX decided to promote American Horror Story's first season was to conduct a short but sweet alternate reality game, or ARG. I personally am most familiar with the ARGs conducted for the first 2 Cloverfield films, but comparatively, AHS's ARG was, again, pretty sparse. Also, I didn't experience this ARG in person, and its website is long gone, so I am getting all of my information from the ARG's page on the AHS wiki, so thanks to all of the contributing editors for archiving some information on this piece of nearly lost AHS media. The ARG seems to give some non-canonical backstories to some residents of the murder house's past that never made it on screen, and that's because nobody on the show's creative team had any involvement with this ARG as far as I can tell, and it doesn't seem like the team that did work on it were given too much information about the show to go off of. But the ARG was presented through different illustrations of rooms in the murder house at different times, the first of which is the living room circa the 1940s. Unlike some of the other rooms, this one doesn't give any names, but it paints the picture of a murdered bride on her wedding day. In the kitchen, we learn about some inhabitants during the 50s, married couple William and Lorraine Baxter. The evidence in this room points to William being abusive towards Lorraine, and it also details William's affair with one of Lorraine's close friends named Celia Jacobs. Actually, it was Celia who owned the murder house at this time, and when Lorraine caught them there, she killed them both. Authorities eventually found Lorraine with her head in the oven, suggesting she killed herself shortly after. However, as we know, the ghosts can pose crime scenes in the murder house to present whatever narratives they want. The attics portion of the ARG is set in the 1970s and tells a dark and short tale of a kid named Alex and his younger sister. Alex was troubled with visions of imaginary friends that eventually took a violent turn, resulting in Alex murdering and dismembering his sister, before he himself died in the house due to unspecified causes. The library takes us to the 80s with another married couple, Marie Nikki Argento and Stanley Samuel Argento. Their story is also dark and short, as they were murdered while filming themselves engaging in BDSM, but their killer was never found. The study tells a story about an anthropologist named V in the 2000s, whose story was left largely open-ended, but fans theorize V and their spouse were either serial killers together, or V might have murdered their entire family for being quote-unquote unclean, as there was evidence to show that she prioritized cleanliness. Lastly, the ARG featured the basement as well, but down there fans would only be able to find an exclusive clip from the then upcoming pilot episode. Some overarching themes in the ARG that also have a presence in AHS Murder House are infidelity, dismemberment, mental illness, and domestic violence. Let me know in the comments below if you played the ARG back in the day and if there's any details that I missed. But now, let's unpack the next episode. Entitled Rubberman, Episode 8 once and for all reveals the identity of the man behind the rubber suit. Flashing back to 6 months ago when the Harmons first moved in, we hear Tate console a confused Nora Montgomery, distressed by the state of the house and confused about where Thaddeus is, who she says is all she wants. So we then see Tate himself take the rubber suit out of the trash can where Ben tossed it in the pilot, and after a shortened version of that episode's assault scene, we see Tate in the rubber suit as he passes Ben on the stairs before he unmasks in front of a mirror. This episode gives the clear answer that Tate is Vivian's rapist, and he did it with the intention of giving Nora Montgomery a child. Back in the present, Vivian discusses her sighting of Nora Montgomery with one ghost and Immortal.
It feels as if someone is trying to make me feel like I'm crazy.
You know, Cousin Helen went paranoid when she was pregnant. She imagined the stuffed animals in the nursery dancing to some dreadful African drumbeat. She thought they were enacting voodoo on her.
What the fuck, Marcy? In another flashback to the previous homos, God rest their souls, we get an origin story to the rubber suit itself. Turns out Patrick's been on a BDSM chat board with a user named
JungleJim4322@yahoo.com.
Chad's friend gives him some bad advice and says he has to go out of his comfort zone and get into BDSM, otherwise he will lose Patrick, so Chad then heads to a sex shop and buys the damned rubber suit. When Chad puts it on for Patrick though, Patrick body shames him, so Chad asks, plain and simple,
Who is JungleJim4322@yahoo.com?
Patrick says Chad's interior decoration hobby has made him unattractive, so Chad kicks him out. Back in the present, the ghosts of Nora and Hayden interact, and she tells it to the constantly confused Nora how it is.
We died in here, and for whatever reason, we can't leave.
What are you implying?
We then see Hayden being likable for a change, although in her defense, this is her first scene not having to do with Ben, as she plays with the ghost of Beauregard and refers to him as one of the innocent, beautiful souls without malice or anger.
It's not fair that they're trapped in a place like this. It's heartbreaking.
She contrasts the spirits like Beau with spirits like Moira and Hugo, who she calls the bitches, her words, not mine. Then, in slight flashbacks to Hayden's short time as a ghost here, we see Moira defending Vivian's honor, and we also see Hayden having an affair with Hugo, although this eventually turns into her stabbing him repeatedly in the chest.
Hey, you want anything from the kitchen?
It doesn't stick.
Hayden then gives Nora the clues to remember the circumstances to her own death, and she also plants the idea of the both of them taking Vivian's twins, one for each of them, having both lost a child. Hayden later becomes a poltergeist and spooks the hell out of Vivian, who eventually finds the rubber mask planted in the bathroom, which transitions to another flashback of Tate suiting up the night that Chad and Patrick were killed, leaving us without a shadow of a doubt that Tate was behind all of the Rubber Man's actions that we've seen so far. The episode then lets Chad and Patrick's deaths play out longer than we previously saw, and we see a truly horrifying and, in my opinion, unnecessary sequence of shots that show Tate sexually mutilating Patrick's corpse. What the fuck, Ryan Murphy? After Tate tosses Patrick's body down the basement, Nora finds it and is very disturbed, and she once again asks Tate where her baby is. Tate tells her that he killed Chad and Patrick because they couldn't give Nora a baby, so with them gone, there's a chance that a new family will move in who can. Once again, back in the present day, Ben finds out Violet's been skipping school for weeks, but Violet says Ben's affair drove Vivian crazy, and that's the root of all of their issues. Vivian is convinced her nausea medicine is causing her to hallucinate, and Moira comforts her.
And everybody thinks I'm crazy.
I know Ben does, I know.
That's what men do. They make you think you're crazy so they can have their fun.
Moira recommends Vivian read the 1892 short story The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, which tells the story of a woman in first person who is subjected to bed rest, trapped in a room by her husband shortly after giving birth. And as the story progresses, her sense of reality is warped and her mental health severely deteriorates. Not only is this a classic 19th century work of horror fiction, it's also notable for its feminist themes, especially for its time. It's also got some notable parallels with this season, like spousal gaslighting, unreliable narrators, and of course, a big spooky mansion. After Moira gives Vivian some more horrifying facts about the history of women's rights, she drops a rather big bomb for our little skeptic.
But this house is possessed. There are spirits here. Malevolent spirits.
But Vivian believes Moira, and when Moira says that she is in danger, Vivian immediately wakes Violet up and says that they are getting the hell out tonight.
We're going to Aunt Joe's.
What?
We're not spending another night here.
Was Aunt Joe not an option this entire time? Because... However, when Vivian and Violet get in the car, the ghosts of the home invaders from episode 2 appear in the back seat, prompting the Harmons to run back inside. The next morning, Ben gets back to doing what he does best, gaslighting, and Vivian gives him a taste of his own yelling.
Police say there was no evidence of anyone.
I know what the police said!
They don't.
Despite Vivian insisting that both she and Violet saw them within a foot of their faces, Ben says that the both of them just never dealt with the trauma from the night of the home invasion. Vivian needs a gun.
I am gonna bash your goddamn face in!
Fine. Let's discuss the brain eating.
This episode is too damn much.
Mad cow disease, Vivian? Have you ever heard of that?
Upstairs, Violet and Tate have off-screen sex for the first time, which, having that occur in the very episode where Tate is revealed as the Rubber Man, to me sends a clear message that Tate is clearly a disgusting piece of ectoplasm, and in no way is this quote-unquote teen romance meant to be romanticized. Because this entire scene subtextually feels just as gross as the one when Tate, quote-unquote, pretended to attack Violet while wearing the rubber suit in the basement. Violet tells Tate about seeing the ghosts of the robbers, and Tate says that she can't tell the truth about seeing them, otherwise they'll try to take her away and put her in a mental hospital. As Ben continues to tell Vivian she's crazy downstairs, Vivian begins to theorize that Ben is pulling an Ivy Mayfair Richards and plotting against her alongside Hayden and his other patients. She also brings up the rubber mask that was planted in the bathroom, but Violet interrupts the conversation. Because of Tate, Violet lies and says that she only told the cops what she thought Vivian wanted her to say, and that there was actually nothing in the back seat. Vivian, let's just end the season right here and pull an Amityville 2 on these assholes. In the basement, Ghost Hayden sexually harasses a ghost teenager, so I'm back on the anti-Hayden train. Vivian invites Marcy over with the intention of stealing her gun. That's what I've been saying, Vivian. So she fakes a migraine and steals the gun out of Marcy's tiny purse. Surely she won't notice that missing weight, and she doesn't. Mission accomplished. That night, Vivian is haunted by Tate in the rubber suit, who eventually attacks her before vanishing. Entering the room after hearing Vivian scream, Vivian shoots Ben in the stomach. When paramedics arrive, Ben refuses to be seen by a doctor, and that never comes up again. He just heals from this. Luke shows up and advocates for Vivian like the man he is, and lets the authorities know that Ben doesn't live here, and he also tells them about Hayden's history. Later that night, Hayden wakes up Vivian with a tried and true method.
Wake up! Looking for your lifeline!
I'm dead.
Dead!
Hayden tells Vivian the Rubber Man's the true father of the babies, and Tate in the suit then enters and attacks Vivian, once again attempting to rape her. But Vivian is soon awoken by Ben and Luke, and soon enough, Vivian is forcefully removed from the house by cops and taken to the hospital for an evaluation.
I wasn't shooting you. I was shooting them. The rapist in the rubber suit.
Hearing her mother refer to the quote-unquote rapist in the rubber suit, Violet looks taken aback. Ben follows Vivian to the hospital, while Violet is comforted by Tate.
It's okay. I'm here.
Episode 8 is a lot. Revealing the Rubber Man to be Tate, no matter how much it has been hinted at already, is horrifying in its reality, and the episode pushes the boundaries even further than I remember it doing. Like I mentioned in my last video, the last time I rewatched Murder House before making this deep dive was around 2018, and I've truly forgotten some major details about the story in the years since. For instance, this episode's graphic depiction of Patrick's death was a complete unpleasant surprise to me, especially since it further complicates the story's complicated handling of sexual violence. Patrick will later get an opportunity to beat the shit out of Tate, but despite the show explicitly showing Tate murdering and abusing Patrick, the sexual element of the murder is never acknowledged with any dialogue. And additionally, the scene itself is gratuitous with what it shows in terms of violence and nudity. Off the top of my head, I can think of some other instances of the show's questionable portrayals of male victims of sexual violence. I point this out to say that alongside the show's inconsistent portrayal of sexual assault itself, I also want to start to pay attention to this specific nuance that I feel like I'm noticing as I continue with these deep dives. This episode is, of course, most notorious for its confirmation that Tate is the rubber man, and another thing that slipped my mind before rewatching it this time is that the episode tries to explain Tate's motive behind his heinous post-mortem activities in the rubber suit. His bond with the ghost of Nora Montgomery that he developed while he was still alive, which was exacerbated by Tate's mommy issues, gave him the goal of giving a baby to Nora, whose ghost self, of course, is lost in perpetual sorrow, mourning baby Thaddeus. So Tate killed Chad and Patrick in hopes that a family would move in, and when the Harmons came in with all their emotional baggage, he decided to take matters into his own hands. The show isn't trying to excuse any of his actions by giving us this explanation, and while I don't find the Nora explanation particularly great, I do appreciate that the show is starting to try to give us all of the pieces to the puzzle of Tate's mental state rather than leaving it completely open. This episode is also when Tate and Violet have sex for the first time, which is spine-chilling within the context of the episode and sent shockwaves into the teen fans that had ignored all of the signs that Tate was behind the mask and professed that he and Violet were meant to be. I was a wee child at the time, so I'm not a first-hand source on this by any means, but I imagine a lot of Tate fans jumped ship after this episode, but infamously, some edgy teens doubled down with their adoration for this irredeemable monster who escaped the gates of hell. As most of you probably know, Tate Langdon and Violet Harmon were what the youngsters call a ship back in the day, meaning fans of the show wanted these two characters to be together romantically. Obviously, the show sets that right up. I remember around 2018, pre-apocalypse, the Tate and Violet fans were still pretty loud, and unfortunately, I do think they shaped some of the way that season ended up going in regards to these characters. But nonetheless, while lurking on the AHS subreddit recently, someone asked that age-old question, why do people romanticize Tate? And I think since it is a very nuanced conversation that I definitely was not a part of back in 2011, the top comment on this post might be more enlightening than anything that I could speculate. They said, I remember when this season first came out, it was the height of the usage of Tumblr and Wattpad, along with the dark emo, grudge, bad boy romance fanfictions and aesthetics. So I guess it became so romanticized to the point that some overlooked what he had done, while some saw a shed of hope that maybe he was good inside and could change. I think that sums up most of it, and of course there's also a history of particularly young people crushing on real-life serial killers, so it's definitely not unprecedented, even if it may rub some of us a weird way. Episode 9, Spooky Little Girl, starts in 1947 with one of the most famous figures to ever cross paths with the murder house, Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia. If you're unaware, this is another instance of the show intertwining a true crime tale with its own lore, as Elizabeth Short is tragically known for being the victim of a brutal murder. At the time of her death, Elizabeth was just 22 years old and was working as a waitress, trying to make a living in Los Angeles just a year after her fiancé died in action during World War II. Her murder captured national attention due to its gruesome nature, and to this day it remains unsolved. In this era of the murder house around 1947, we learn it is owned by a dentist who runs his practice out of the mansion, just like the doctor who came before him and the psychiatrist who came after. The show goes with a popular characterization of Elizabeth Short as an aspiring actress, and she tells the dentist that she's short on cash and she hopes they can make an arrangement. After she is put under, the show cuts to the next scene, which is its depiction of the discovery of Elizabeth's body, which the show recreates all of the true crime's horrifying details. The 2011 timeline then continues with an argument between a highly intoxicated Constance and Travis that ends with Constance sending him out for more cigarettes. On the way to the store though, he's catcalled by Hayden, and after they hook up, Travis says he's in love with Constance. Later, Elizabeth Short walks into Ben's office requesting an emergency session.
It's a strange feeling, an endless foreboding, like a dream I can't wake myself out of.
Sounds like acute anxiety.
Elizabeth tries to pay Ben with sex, and despite fantasizing about engaging with her, Ben turns her down. Soon after, Ben gets a call from Dr. Hall, informing him that Vivian's babies are a rare instance of twins that have different fathers.
Your wife must have had intercourse with two different men during the same ovulation cycle.
Constance searches the house for Violet after incorrectly assuming she's slept with Travis, and Moira informs her of the newly discovered information that Vivian's twins are from different fathers. Immediately fearing that Tate is the other father, Constance desperately tries to talk to her son, who eventually appears to her and entertains a full conversation for once.
Tell me you did not crawl on top of that man's wife. Oh.
Mom, you can't tell Violet, okay? Please don't.
What is wrong with you? Don't you realize what you've done, Mama?
We will soon realize what exactly Tate has done, but anyway, elsewhere, Ben walks in on Moira and Elizabeth having sex, which reveals an interesting note to the nature of Moira's dual appearances, as Elizabeth sees Moira's younger self, unlike the other female characters' perspectives we've been shown so far. But heartbroken that Ben doesn't join in with them, Elizabeth is later comforted by Hayden.
My dreams will never come true. I must become famous.
Honey, don't you know who you are?
The show then flashes back to where we left off with Elizabeth's visit to the dentist, where we see her being raped by the dentist while she is unconscious. In doing this, it appears the dentist inadvertently killed her from too much gas. He takes her corpse down to the basement, where it is the ghost of Charles Montgomery who mutilates the body.
I really did become somebody.
At the mental hospital where Vivian is being kept, a doctor tells Ben that she has been restrained after attacking a doctor who had suggested that her visions of the rubber man could be a sexual fantasy. Now trapped in a cement cell without any yellow wallpaper to peel off, Vivian is a shell of herself, and Ben is an absolute monster.
You're thinking, thank God he's here. Thank God he can see what they're doing to me and how wrong it is. You're in hell here. And I'd move heaven and earth for the Vivian I thought I was married to. But you aren't her. You're a stranger to me.
Because he knows Vivian's twins are fathered by two separate people, he's already decided that Vivian is a traitor and a liar and a cheater, without Vivian being given a chance to prove her innocence due to the fact that he's had her institutionalized and now sedated.
I wouldn't lift a finger to help you get out of here.
And back at the house, Ben tells Hayden they will never be together because he has never loved her. Hayden then lies to Ben and says that Vivian and Luke have been having an affair, which Ben of course believes instantly. Constance proposes to Travis, saying there will soon be a baby she will have to care for, and he would be a great father. But Travis says he's not ready for all that, and he still wants to pursue a modeling career.
What career? What? This dream you have of appearing half naked in your skivvies 60 feet high above Times Square? I know that dream. I had that dream.
Their argument turns violent, Constance threatens him, and Travis departs to go have sex with Hayden once again. Afterwards, he professes he still loves Constance, and now he's ready to be a father. But Travis's sudden change of heart is short-lived as Hayden stabs him right in the old ticker. Then the ghosts of Hayden, Elizabeth Short, Charles Montgomery, and Travis himself debate how they're going to get Travis's body out of the house. Off-screen, Charles mutilates Travis's corpse in the same way he did to Elizabeth, and with the help of Larry Harvey, Travis's remains are planted in a park. Constance visits Vivian at the mental hospital, and Vivian again notes how abnormally fast the pregnancy is moving. On her way out, Constance says she feels for Vivian's situation, and Vivian flat out tells Constance she was raped, and she knows it was not a hallucination.
Well, of course not. Oh, honey, I never doubted it for a minute.
Back at the house, Ben confronts Luke about the affair that Hayden lied about, but Luke tells Ben that he can't reproduce, so Ben asks Moira for some more details about the rubber suit.
I think I made a horrible mistake by putting Vivian in the hospital.
Congratulations, Dr. Harmon. You're finally beginning to see things as they are.
As Moira delivers that line, she transitions from younger to older Moira while still only within Ben's perspective, suggesting her older portrayal only appears to those who see things unclouded by judgment, or more likely that Moira herself controls the perspective switch at her own will. It seems up to interpretation to me. Fearful of the consequences of the dead having intercourse with the living, Constance calls Billie Dean over again and asks her directly what would go down. And Billie Dean says,
You do know about the box? The Pope's box?
What the hell are you talking about?
She explains that each newly elected pope is ceremoniously shown into the quote-unquote room of tears, where he opens a box that
contains the ultimate secret. It holds the secret of the end of the world.
Cut to the chase.
This piece of paper reveals the precise nature of the Antichrist.
Billie Dean, who I guess is best friends with the Pope, explains that if a spirit and a mortal were to ever successfully reproduce, that child would be the Antichrist and would bring upon the apocalypse. And that prophecy is what is contained in this ultra-secret box that each Pope is shown. So, ghost plus human equals Antichrist baby that will bring upon the apocalypse. Wow, they should totally make a season about that. In reality, though, the Pope's box is almost entirely based in conspiracy theory, and the Room of Tears itself is ceremoniously just where the new Pope changes into their official robes for the first time. Regardless, Billie Dean's retelling of the prophecy of the Pope's box scares the hell out of Constance, and most definitely has a lasting impact on the series. Another episode full of side quests and side characters. I'd say it's most memorable for its depiction of Elizabeth Short, aka the Black Dahlia. Now, unlike Sal Mineo, the show opted to make Elizabeth Short into an entire character, and it solves her unsolved murder by connecting it to the lore of the murder house. There are things about her scenes that I enjoy, and actress Mina Suvari does a great job embodying her. However, I also think there are some very insensitive things the showrunner chose to do about this very real and very horrific true crime. Call me sensitive, but for one, they chose to recreate the mutilated corpse, which must have been a particularly dark few weeks in the props department, and additionally, the show takes a lot of creative liberties with its portrayal of Elizabeth, who, remember, was only 22 years old when she was killed. Not only is her dream of being a famous actress not entirely based in reality, they proceed to create several sexual elements to their version of Elizabeth, which of course also have no evidence in reality. Within the show, not only is she the victim of rape, she is shown offering to pay for Ben's psychiatry services with sex, and she's also shown having intercourse with Moira, all within the runtime of this episode. From a writing and character perspective, a lot of this just rubbed me the wrong way, especially considering the context of the Black Dahlia and how there is so little information about who she was as a person. This episode also shows Vivian being locked away and Ben being somehow even worse than he was being this whole time, and by the end of it, Billie Dean Howard's talking about the Pope and setting up a season 8 years down the line. The second half of Murder House is definitely much less balanced, and it's now the point in the season where it's time to start wrapping things up, not introducing more plot points that simply cannot all be wrapped up within 3 episodes. The 10th episode, entitled Smoldering Children, again starts in 1994, during a dinner between Constance, Larry, Tate, and Adelaide. Tate brings up how Larry's wife killed herself and their children, but as you see, Larry's face is unscarred, meaning his injuries came from a separate incident. Tate correctly accuses Larry of being responsible for Beauregard's death, but Constance insists he died of natural causes. After telling Constance he'll never be her perfect son, he goes upstairs to his room where he ingests some substances and loads up his guns. Afterwards, he visits Larry at his day job where he douses him in gasoline and lights a match, revealing that the true origin of Larry's scars was Tate getting payback for Larry murdering Beauregard. He doesn't know that his mother was in on it as well, but all of this seems to also indicate some potential motives for Tate's violent rampage sometime after attempting to murder Larry. In the present timeline, Ben visits Vivian at the hospital and apologizes, and he says he now believes her because of his talk with Luke. Ben also reveals to Vivian for the first time that her twins have 2 different fathers. Ben promises to get Vivian out of the hospital as soon as possible, but Vivian insists that she will not move back into the murder house, which seems more than fair to me. Constance is later visited by detectives to identify crime scene photos of Travis's body, and she confirms the remains are his, but Constance is unable to give the detectives any leads. A cop then arrives at the murder house to do a wellness check on Violet, who hasn't been to school for 16 days now, and he's taken aback by the group of flies circling a bowl of apples. Surely another reference to the Amityville Horror, but unlike in that film, the exterminator suggests these aren't omens of the devil, they're just coming from something rotting in the house's vast crawl spaces. At Larry's apartment, Constance visits and accuses him of killing Travis, so Larry tells her the truth about Hayden killing him in the murder house, so Constance leaves to try and talk to Travis's ghost. Constance is later questioned by the detectives again, who bring up the death of Beauregard, Tate's crimes, as well as the disappearances of Hugo Langdon and Moira O'Hara, who back in the day, detectives believed Constance was responsible for. But of course, they were unable to ever find either of their bodies. Flashbacks then reveal that Constance refused to bury Hugo in the same grave as Moira, so she ground his body up into food for her dogs. A lawyer shows up and warns Constance that the Boy Dahlia case has garnered a lot of attention, so the police department wants to pin it on somebody quick, and right now, that's Constance. Larry goes snooping in the basement when the ghost of Travis shows up. Travis is down here because he's having a tea party with 2 ghost children who we've yet to meet, Margaret and Angela Harvey, Larry's daughters. As he watches his daughters sip tea with Travis, Larry's wife Lorraine shows herself to him for the first time. Larry promises he's going to make Constance pay for destroying their family, but Lorraine says that the only person who broke a vow was Larry. Lorraine also tells Larry that he doesn't have much time left alive. Then, while doing a Terminator impression, the exterminator enters the crawl spaces of the murder house to try and find the source of the fly infestation. He is horrified at what he eventually finds, but the audience is left out of the loop for now. Tate quickly appears and murders Mr. Exterminator with his own chemicals. Afterwards, Tate overhears Ben talking to a college admissions office about Violet, and he quickly warns Violet that her dad is trying to send her away. Tate soon suits up to attack Ben, but Ben is able to overpower him on several different occasions. Ben unmasks Tate, but only shortly before he passes out due to Tate's chemical rag. Tate tells Violet he made it so her dad would leave them alone for an hour, while Tate says he thought of a perfect plan to make them both free and happy. He tells Violet that they need to kill themselves. Violet says she'll go set things up, but once she's out of the attic, she cries out for help, saying that Tate is trying to murder her. Tate chases after her, so she tries to run out of the house's front gates, but when she walks through them, she immediately enters the house through the kitchen. She repeats this strategy a few times more, in hysterics, trying to comprehend what is happening. Tate tries to enlighten her, but he eventually decides to just show her. In the basement, Tate reveals the abandoned crawl space that has been storing Violet's own dead body.
A dead body. Dead bodies. How's this look, huh? New looks?
The show then flashes back to Violet's suicide attempt from episode 6, revealing that Tate was actually unable to save her in that shower, and Violet died that day and has been unknowingly living as a ghost ever since.
I had this idea that if you chose to die with me, you wouldn't be so sad.
At the police station, Larry turns himself in as the sole murderer of Travis, and the police take his word for it. With only 2 episodes to go following this, episode 10 does its best to give us all of the necessary information to set up episode 11, which in a lot of ways feels like a finale, while episode 12 itself feels more like an epilogue. But the resulting episode, episode 10, is actually pretty exposition heavy as a result, but it is of course leading to the biggest reveal of the season, that Violet has been dead since her suicide attempt in episode 6. Much like Tate's reveals of being dead and also being the Rubber Man, Violet's reveal had a ton of hints along the way as well, to the point where, to me, it felt painfully obvious before the show inevitably ripped the band-aid off. But I had a similar experience rewatching The Sixth Sense recently, so I think I can't be too hard on twists that end up being so heavily ingrained into common knowledge, and clearly the Violet twist was the most effective twist of the season, and it certainly is a climactic moment nailed by Thaisa Farmiga, Evan Peters, and every creative person involved in achieving the sequence itself, because it's one that belongs in a horror hall of fame if there ever were one. I thought the reveal about Tate being responsible for Larry's scars as revenge for Larry murdering Beauregard was unexpected and provides enough context for us to start piecing together the reasons behind the downfall of Tate Langdon in 1994. Additionally, the show never lets up with painting Constance as a reprehensible villain, and she continues to push those boundaries with her intense dialogue in this episode as well. The penultimate episode of AHS's inaugural season is entitled Birth, and it's pretty climactic as the title suggests. Beginning with a flashback as usual, this time to 1984, we find Constance Langdon deep in an alcoholic depression while a young Tate Langdon is attacked by the Infantata, before the ghost of Nora rescues him.
No, Thaddeus, go away!
In the present day, Tate checks up on a sobbing Nora who does not recognize him, and she is still asking where her baby is. She remembers fragments of Tate's plan to get her a baby though, but Tate now tells her he can no longer fulfill that promise.
I'm in love with Violet. I just can't take her brother away.
But I can. And I will.
Meanwhile, Ben forces Violet to get in the car to visit Vivian at the hospital, but he doesn't notice when she vanishes from the back seat. Tate and Violet walk in on the previous homos decorating the nursery, who tell them that they also intend on stealing Vivian's twins for themselves. What the hell, sure. Violet later tells Constance of Chad and Patrick's plans, so she later confronts them in the nursery, where they've now painted the furniture bright red. During the flamingly homophobic confrontation, Constance accidentally lets it slip that Tate fathered one of the twins, and she tries to make a deal so that they can only kidnap the child that Ben fathered, but Chad refuses that offer. As Vivian packs her things as she's been discharged from the hospital, she promises her doctor that she'll be completely safe traveling to her sister's house in Florida. Well, damn, that is pretty far. But Vivian says it's fine, she's still only 6 months pregnant. However, the doctor warns
one of these babies has been developing at a rapid rate,
and he worries that an emergency C-section may be needed sooner than expected, especially for the survival of the other twin.
All the necessary nutrients are being devoured by the larger fetus, the alpha, if you will.
In the next scene, Billie Dean returns to the murder house because Constance has a request that requires her expertise.
Can you ferret out the fairies for us?
She wants to banish Chad and Patrick's spirits from the house, but Billie says she must first untether them from the strong force of darkness within the house.
You'll see it all the time in places like prisons or asylums. Negative energy feeds on trauma and pain. It draws those things to it.
This line of dialogue in particular sparked a sometimes consistent trend where the showrunners would hide clues towards the next season's theme within the show itself.
But what do we do about the gays? I mean, how do we get rid of them?
Billie makes Tate leave before she continues her attempt to potentially commit a spiritual hate crime, but when she speaks to Tate, it very clearly takes a negative toll on her. With him out of the room, Billy Dean exposition dumps about the very complicated way you can banish a spirit, but in reality it's just by shouting a singular word. As we discussed in my Roanoke deep dive, it was here in Murder House that AHS first talked about the lost colony of Roanoke, as Billy Dean explains in this scene that the lost colonists actually died where they were abandoned, and their spirits went on to haunt and murder nearby indigenous people. One day though, the indigenous people fought back against the ghost colonists with a banishment curse.
How? By uttering a single word. Croatoan.
There is obviously so much wrong about the show's first vague portrayal of indigenous cultures, and Roanoke doesn't even use this flashback's timeline of events, but as we soon see, it doesn't matter for all that long because shouting Croatoan has no effect on the Murder House ghosts. After being sent on a quest to retrieve a personal item of the gays by Violet, Tate tries flirting with Patrick to get the job done, but Patrick takes this as a chance to rightfully beat the shit out of Tate.
I'm not supposed to be here!
Vivian and Ben arrive at the house to grab their things before ignoring the doctor's recommendations and heading to Florida, and Vivian refuses to enter the house until she begins to experience painful contractions. When Ben tries to go get Violet to leave the house again, which of course she can't do, Vi pleads with her dad to leave and get Vivian far away from the house.
I tell Mom I love her. Good luck with the babies.
Not listening to her, Violet tries to tell Ben that she is dead, but Ben then accuses her of being on drugs. Later in the basement, Violet tries yelling Croatoan at Chad, but like I said, that doesn't work here. But lucky for Violet, Chad no longer wants to kidnap the babies because he's finally realized that Patrick doesn't love him. Chad then bluntly enlightens Violet on the fact that Tate was behind the murders of himself, Patrick, as well as Vivian's rape. Constance ushers Vivian into the house against her will.
No, honey. When a child is ready to be born, there's no stopping it. No! Come on, we gotta get you to the house.
Once Vivian gets inside the house, shit starts to get real spooky as the redheaded twins fuck up the Harmon's car and the power goes out.
Dr. Harmon. It's time.
As Vivian enters labor, she is attended to by Dr. Charles Montgomery and nurses Maria and Gladys. With his brain running on Internet Explorer, Ben finally figures out that this house might just be haunted after all. Meanwhile, Vivian's pain is insurmountable and she first delivers a stillborn. Soon after, it's time for the big one as complications ensue. But after a long ordeal, Vivian gives birth to the second baby, who comes out healthy. Constance refuses to hand the baby to Vivian, and as she ushers him away, Vivian dozes off and loses consciousness. As Ben sobs, Vivian transitions into the spirit realm, unable to be rescued by Charles' 20th century medicine. Violet then confronts Tate for all of his lies, including lying about not knowing he was dead, how he died, and what he did leading up to his death. Tate owns up to knowing he was dead the whole time, but he continues to act naive about the school shooting.
Why would I do that? Why would I do that? Why would I do that?
Violet then asks him why he killed Chad and Patrick, and also why he assaulted Vivian.
I'm sorry. I was different then.
I used to think you were like me. You were attracted to the darkness. But Tate, you are the darkness.
Tate then goes into master metaphysical manipulation mode, saying that Violet has been his only reprieve from the darkness, and that their relationship is his form of salvation.
I love you, Tate. But I can't forgive you. You have to pay for what you did.
Violet says she refuses to be with Tate, especially now that his spawn killed her mom. So to make this breakup official, Violet does the ghost banishing spell that Tate taught her, and he himself was taught by Nora, which is very simply telling the ghost to go away.
Go away, Tate!
You're all I want! You're all I have!
As Violet sobs in Tate's absence, she is soon comforted by the ghost of Vivian.
It was very brave. I'm proud of you.
Unlike Ben and Vivian, Violet does get a pretty good conclusion in this episode, which feels more like a finale than the actual finale. Violet's slow acceptance of the magnitude of Tate's darkness, building towards her finally rejecting him, I thought was very well done in episode 11. Violet makes a truly tough choice that builds a ton of her personal character and affirms her and her mother's relationship, ended on a more positive note. I also liked how explicitly the episode confirms Tate was lying about everything, like not knowing he was dead at the beginning of the season. And he eventually does take accountability for what he did to Vivian, at the very least, proving he does take ownership of his worst actions. And we're not going to keep pushing the theory that the house's darkness is possessing him to do those things. And despite how complicated of a character Tate seemed to be at first, this episode does give us enough context to put together some sort of motive. The school shooting was directly preceded by several life-altering shifts in Tate's home life, a new father figure that Tate despised, and the death of Tate's brother, Beauregard, who Tate correctly suspected was murdered by Larry. This gives him motive to do what he did next, attempting to murder Larry, and shortly after committing the massacre at his high school. And again, the show tells us that his bond with Nora is what persuaded him to commit more atrocities to ensure that she would have a child again. Some final notes on this episode. Billie Dean in this season has always walked the line of being an actual medium or being a phony. This episode, though, she is clearly way off base with her Croatoan theory, which to me suggests that she may not know all of what she claims to. Lastly, the episode's last-minute side plots with both Hayden and the gays wanting to steal Vivian's babies felt very unnecessary because their reasons for wanting the babies were far less compelling than both Constance and Nora's, and ultimately the show did favor the more compelling storylines, and those other two parties wanting the babies purely felt like padding the runtime. Now, before we move on to the final episode of Murder House, there is a bit of production tea to sip on first. Because if you remember, all the way back in the beginning, FX picked up AHS for 13 episodes, and that remained the case until very late in production. However, as you may know, Murder House actually only has 12 episodes. You may also recall me saying that AHS was forced into a rushed and hectic production schedule as the showrunners were simultaneously running Glee's second season. As an article in Deadline revealed back in the day, because of the complexity of shooting many of the episodes of Murder House, their shooting schedules kept getting more and more delayed, eventually forcing the showrunners and FX to make a decision around November to either cut the 13th episode entirely or shoot and air it sometime after the winter break. Given the inconvenience of that second option, Murphy ended up combining whatever material was written for episode 13 into episode 12, and with commercial breaks, the 12th and final episode aired as a 90-minute finale, which accounts for about 20 to 30 minutes of cut material from that elusive, originally scripted episode 13. So now that you know some of the context behind this truly odd finale, in my opinion, let's now unpack it once and for all. The final episode of AHS Murder House, entitled Afterbirth, again starts with a flashback. This time it's to back when the Harmons were living in Boston, shortly after Vivian caught Ben cheating. Vivian says she's going to Florida to live with her sister. She's given the LA move more thought, and she can't get over the affair after all. But Ben manipulates her to agree to visiting LA to see a house that he has his eyes on. The next scene cuts back to where the last episode left off, where Ben is now alone in the house, wandering the halls, looking for his deceased family members. Later, Constance offers free childcare to Ben, but he says Vivian's sister will be taking care of the sitting. But obviously, Constance refuses to let go of the baby so easily, and she professes that the dangers of the murder house are too dangerous for the newborn. Ben's unobservant ass also realizes for the first time in this scene that Tate's been long dead, and he now blames Constance for the hell of the previous 6 months.
You destroyed my family. You
are paying for your own sins, Dr. Harmon.
Moira helps Vivian adjust to the afterlife, and Vivian says that she's making sure she and Violet don't show themselves to Ben so he won't want to stay there with them. But Vivian immediately has to cross that line to prevent Ben from killing himself.
That baby needs a father, Ben.
Ben still begs to stay with her and Violet, but Vivian says she wants Ben to raise her son. Violet appears too and says every moment Ben and the baby spend inside the house is a moment their lives are in danger. Finally convinced, Ben heads out with the baby, but at the stairs, he is stopped by Hayden, Larry, and the robbers, who attack Ben and murder him by hanging him from the chandelier.
Now we have all the time in the world.
With Ben's death, the last remaining Harmons are the still unnamed baby, and of course, Hallie, who in the next scene we see is being looked after by Marcy, the realtor.
I've adopted her.
Marcy is showing the murder house to some potential buyers, the Ramos family, Miguel, Stacy, and Gabe, and she has to share the unfortunate news of the Harmons' passings, yet she omits any details about Violet's death for no apparent reason. The dad, Miguel, is played by Anthony Ruvivar, who you may know from playing Richard Ramirez when he briefly appears in AHS Hotel, and he's also in some other horror TV shows, including The Haunting of Hill House and Scream. The Ramos family buys the house, best of luck to them, and next door, Constance gives a statement to detectives who let us know that Vivian's newborn is now missing following Ben's death. But we soon learn that Constance is lying to the cops, and she has of course taken the baby into her own custody after Travis helped her steal it from Hayden. Now she keeps him in her reflective room of torment. Miguel and Stacy, a noticeably much healthier couple than we've ever seen living in this house, share their affection and talk about having another baby.
We have to do something.
You're going to need help.
Moira says that while many ghosts here are sinister evildoers,
Many of us are innocent, kind, blameless victims at the hands of another. And we don't want to see more suffering in this house.
So that night, when Miguel starts sleepwalking just like Ben before him, Ben puts on the rubber suit and gets into bed with Stacy. When Stacy fights back, she runs into the hallway where Beauregard is playing his part in helping the Ramos family get the hell out of there ASAP. Stacy is later scared by Gladys, as well as Mr. Exterminator. And while Miguel burns his hands on the stove, Vivian, Lorraine, Moira, and Elizabeth help him see the truth about the house way before Ben ever did. Then, for their last act, Vivian slices Ben open with a knife.
You have no idea how long I've been wanting to do that.
Ben, however, then shoots Vivian in the head.
You have no idea how long I wanted to do that.
Before they rise, and in case their message wasn't clear,
This is what it does to you. This house.
Run.
All the while, Tate tries to kill Gabriel so that he can be Violet's new boyfriend, but Violet eventually shows herself to Tate to save the kid. To give Gabe an opportunity to make a run for it, Violet gives Tate a goodbye kiss before once again vanishing to Tate. And the good-intentioned spirits succeed in driving the Ramos family out of the murder house, but of course,
Another poor family's just gonna move in here.
in the next scene, Tate asks Ben if they can have another session, but Ben calls Tate a monster and says that the world shutting him out are the consequences of his actions. When Ben calls out that Tate can hardly own up for any of his wrongdoings, Tate does exactly that, taking ownership for the deaths of his classmates and of Larry, as well as for Vivian's rape. We finally then see Vivian playing her cello that was mentioned all the way back in episode 1, signifying the immense emotional toll life had taken on her post finding out about Ben and Hayden's affair. She stops playing though when she hears the crying of a baby. In the basement, she finds Nora taking care of a newborn, which happens to be the spirit of Vivian's stillborn, who Nora says actually passed away seconds after being born. Nora, who has named him Little Noisy Monster, ends up leaving the baby to Vivian after the baby is instantly quiet in her arms. At the end of their story, the Harmons and Moira decorate a Christmas tree.
I didn't think it was possible for me, Vivian. But I'm happy.
Then the finale concludes with a 5-minute epilogue taking place around the year 2014, 3 years after the death of the Harmons. In this epilogue, Constance reveals the surviving baby's name to be Michael Langdon. She tells her hairdresser that every loss and tragedy in her life was preparing her for her greatest role yet, and that is to be Michael's mother.
This child, a remarkable boy, destined for
When she returns home, though, her life has once again been shadowed with tragedy, as 3-year-old Michael has murdered his babysitter, and above her corpse he smiles proudly.
Now what am I gonna do with you?
As I mentioned earlier, the actual final episode of AHS feels more like an epilogue than a proper finale, and a lot of things about it left me scratching my head. The Ramos family is fine, but I honestly don't care about them enough for them to be given so much of the episode's early focus. What we do see from the Harmons leaves a lot to be desired as well, in my opinion. I get that they wanted to scare the Ramos family into moving out as soon as possible, but I think there are many other ways to scare them than Ben literally putting on the rubber suit and getting into bed with an unsuspecting woman, and the idea that Ghost Vivian would be cool with that plan is definitely hard to believe. Similarly, the scene where she and Ben kill each other with smiles on their faces also felt out of character for them both, even though they were acting. I don't need to see Ben joyously killing Vivian. It just felt thoughtless and needlessly silly when, I don't know, we could have shown these ghosts being creative in ways that we haven't seen the previous spirits be. Another perplexing element of the finale is Tate trying to kill the teenager so that the kid could be with Violet, since she doesn't want to be with Tate. But why would Tate's mindset be to force Violet into an arranged marriage with someone she's barely met, and vice versa? It doesn't make sense, and it felt like at this point of the episode, the writers no longer cared about concluding its main protagonist's stories. The second half of Murder House continues to shock with several twists and unexpected character deaths, and while I still prefer the storytelling of the first 6 episodes, the decisions that were made in the second half of the season are what cemented the show in popular culture. For instance, without the twist on Violet's character or the tragic end to every member of the Harmon family, I think the show might have had a lesser impact overall, and the first season of the show's ability to continuously shock viewers throughout the season kept people tuning in, and for the most part, the season is complete and incredibly impactful. That said, 14 years later, there is a lot to be desired with the way Murder House concludes. Aside from Constance, all of our major characters are dead, with a lot of their major conflicts still unresolved, specifically with both Vivian and Violet. They are now eternally trapped within the same walls as their horrible on and off again love interests, and of course, one of the most compelling storylines introduced early on in the season, Moira's escape plan, gets completely abandoned in the second half of the season. And as you just heard, I'm also not a fan of a lot of the tonal choices of the season finale, or how Vivian's agency gets taken away from her during the last few episodes, and I was also shocked at how much it escalated the viscerality of its depictions of sexual violence when compared to the first half of the season as well. Reflecting on the season as a whole, not just the second half, an obvious highlight is the season's visuals. I especially like the visual choices made to differentiate the separate eras of the house, with the camera department, the art department, costume department, hair and makeup all coming together to really sell the atmosphere and the horror of this historical hellmouth. And of course, the casting in this season was great, arguably launching the careers of people like Evan Peters and Thaisa Farmiga, while also featuring some incredible and well-known talents like Jessica Lange, Frances Conroy, and Connie Britton to elevate their characters to their fullest potential. But even those actors without awards and acclaim behind them, like Jamie Brewer and so many of the season's guest stars, aside from some Ben and Tate moments, the acting in this season is truly top-notch. I also think the season expertly looped together tropes of haunted house horror while also creating a universe that feels extremely unique, and obviously AHS was able to build an entire expanded universe upon. Similarly, the season's similarities to Rosemary's Baby feel natural without the show trying to recreate that story beat for beat, like so many other modern day takes on Rosemary's Baby. Through Vivian Harmon's scenes and the scenes of all of the women who crossed paths with the murder house over the past century, the show presents commentary on the shared struggles of women, particularly when pertaining to marriage, pregnancy, and healthcare. With Vivian's conclusion in the second half, it also presents a bleak reality where women's autonomy and agency are stripped from them without their say. And that is the type of message that I truly love when the show pushes, because it really ties into the deeper meaning behind the show's title, American Horror Story. Additionally, there is themes of violence against women, both sexual and domestic, with several characters including Vivian, Moira, Elizabeth, Hayden, and Adelaide being victims of abuse at certain points during the season. As the season progresses and there are more instances of sexual assault scenes, the show does lose some taste and sensitivity when it comes to portraying its victims and opting not to shy away from more graphic visual depictions. Other major themes in the season are child abuse and teenage depression, with Constance obviously being sadistic with her parenting tactics, and the less in-your-face casual neglect of Ben and Vivian being too distracted by their own circumstances to notice that their daughter has been dead for 2.5 weeks, or also severely depressed long before that. The teenage depression through line is mostly portrayed through Tate and Violet, as Tate is eternally a teenager despite dying in 1994, and Violet similarly dies in this season as a teenager, but it is mostly portrayed through the lens of self-harm, and I would say throughout those scenes of Violet's self-harm, I find them to be quite repetitive and gratuitous, and it's those types of scenes alongside Patrick's unnecessarily brutal death scene had me asking whether those types of scenes were pushing boundaries for the sake of horror or purely just for shock value. And while everyone has different boundaries, it is things like that that make this a hard season for a lot of people to revisit. There's a lot going on in Murder House. Some of it handles with a lot of care and intention, while others feel a lot more like a mixed bag or like an afterthought. But given the landscape of television at the time, and the intended audience for the show, I am, of course, still against censorship. In no way do I think Disney Plus, if it ends up on Disney Plus soon, should go back and re-edit the scenes of self-harm out of this show. No, I think that would be taking it too far. I think the farthest streaming services should go is to put a warning on things that may have harsh content or triggering content. Yeah, because like I said in the first half of my video, not everybody is going to be triggered by these things, but to the people who are, you should be looking out for yourself and informing yourself and not putting yourself in bad situations. So there are two sides to every situation, but I am, again, pro-informing yourself and anti-censorship. But now let's talk a bit more specifically about some standout characters. Of course, we are focused on Ben and Vivian for a majority of the season, and I think Connie Britton as Vivian is an incredible AHS protagonist in the first half of the season who unfortunately gets severely weakened by her Antichrist pregnancy and her eventual sedation at the mental hospital. And while this certainly delivers an effective tale of a woman's life being upended by her own rape combined with her husband's infidelity, the second half of the season certainly suffers from a lack of Connie Britton. Ben, on the other hand, is an insufferable character throughout, and with everything he does in the second half of the season, he somehow becomes even more horrible. I don't like this character. He's written to be atrocious, and in my opinion, there's not much McDermott does with his portrayal of Ben to give him any likability. This season is actually full of really unlikable characters, in my opinion. Ben, Tate, Hayden, and honestly Violet most of the time, just to name a few. But speaking of Violet, let's talk about her a bit more. My problems with Violet are entirely with how she's written. I don't think the writers did much to define her outside of her feelings about her dad's affair and her relationship with Tate, which of course is troubled throughout, and for a large part of the season consists of her rehashing those same feelings of animosity towards her parents. These feelings are of course justified, but the show treats it like giving her grungy clothes and self-harm scars is enough to characterize an entire person, but I was for the most part left wanting a lot more from Violet's writing. There are, however, a couple of instances where we see a more light and human side to Violet, and that is in her interactions with Adelaide, particularly in the scene where Addie asks Violet to do her makeup. I think both Violet and Adelaide's characters could have been expanded upon greatly if the writers allowed for more scenes like this to explore some of the light within both of these ladies' extremely dark circumstances. Speaking of Adelaide Langdon, her story is definitely the hardest to watch, and her death in episode 5 held such emotional weight in the first half of the season, only for Addie to rarely get mentioned in the second half of the season. Of course, the show has so much going on at that point, but her absence was extremely noticeable. In life, Adelaide was horribly abused, tormented, bullied, and infantilized by her mother and often complete strangers, despite contextually being around her late 30s during the present-day timeline. Like her brother Beauregard, she serves the purpose of portraying the violent and controlling side of Constance, as both of these characters literally have their lives stolen from them, never once given the chance to leave home. Unlike Beau, Adelaide was eventually able to escape her mother's abuse by passing on before Constance could drag her back to the murder house, but despite her relatively happier ending, justice for Adelaide was far from served in this season. Constance herself, of course, is one of the show's most memorable and iconic villains, largely due to Jessica Lange's incredibly layered and intense portrayal of her. The more the season goes on, the more we realize that Constance has a purpose of explaining another one of the season's villains, her son, Tate Langdon, who, like his mother, is a murderer and a master manipulator. Tate, who I think I've spoke about enough, is actually portrayed in this season with way less ambiguity than I remembered. By the end of it, it's clear that his upbringing was a major source of his own mental issues, and despite Tate owning up to his biggest crimes in the end, he still is rightfully shunned by Violet by the end of the season, which I think sends a very clear message about how the audience should feel about him as well. So the fact that people were still saying Tate was possessed by the darkness of the house around the time of Apocalypse is silly, and even sillier is the way that Apocalypse reinforces that idea, but we will have to cross that bridge when we get to it. Some final character points. Moira had a great setup in the first 6 episodes, only for her storylines to get sidelined for the most part in the final 6, which is a criminal way to treat what I would call the best spirit living in the murder house. Not living, but you know what I mean. Also, the season is bloated with a lot of unnecessary and forgettable or dropped storylines, like Violet's bully Leah, Luke and Vivian's flirtations, Constance's boyfriend Travis, the LA murder cult, Joe the property developer, and I know a lot of people like this part of the season, but the inclusion of Elizabeth Short did not add much to the season to me, and it's things like that that caused the second half of the season to lose the focus of the story a lot more often than the first half did. This rewatch of Murder House was truly enlightening to me, and I think this season and Freak Show are definitely ones I was long overdue for a reevaluation of, so Freak Show is on my mind eventually, after we get through Coven and Apocalypse. Murder House is iconic, but it also has a lot of issues. With that said, Murder House actually might not land too differently on any future rankings of the seasons that I may do in the future, because while it certainly had its high highs, the story often gets lost in the crawl spaces. Thank you so much for making it to the end of my Murder House deep dive. I really wanted to unpack my complex and honest feelings about this season, and it may not have a clear thesis or conclusion, but I hope it helps you sort out some of your own complicated feelings on the season if you too had a similar experience with it as me. But please let me know all of your thoughts, whether you agreed with the 30,000 words that I said over these past 2 videos. I love to hear what you guys have to say, and also make sure to check to see if you guys are subscribed so you don't miss the next one. With that, I will see you next time.